the latest Christopher Nolan film to hit theaters, and yes, I do mean theaters because this was the movie that for a long time, it was no question, like, it's not going to VOD, this has to go to theaters, whether that was a Warner Bros. Specific thing they had to do, or maybe it was a push by Nolan. I don't know, either way, it's coming out right now in the middle of a pandemic, with the attempts of bringing people back to the theaters to save their business, pretty much, just from the business standpoint. This movie's about a young man who's an agent for the government, played by John David Washington, who's enlisted to help this organization called Tenet, dealing with this arms dealer led by Kenneth Branagh. He's doing a lot of nasty stuff, planning to do a lot of nasty stuff, and it involves time inversion. And I won't try to go into the specifics as far as that goes, you know, you'll just kind of have to see the movie to see how they explain it. I was really excited for this movie because it's a Christopher Nolan movie. He's obviously one of our most daring, boldest filmmakers working today. I have yet to see a bad film from him. You know, my least favorite film from him for so long was Interstellar, but that movie is still a movie that I like a lot. You know, it's a really, really great movie with a lot of heart, you know, even though it does have some issues and it's not as good as some of his more grandiose works. It's still really good. And this is definitely a movie that Christopher Nolan has put his all into as far as the theatrical experience goes, the technical aspects of this movie. This movie is once again another great made Nolan film. You know, the cinematography is excellent. The visual effects they do to do the time inversion effect, it looks great. The action sequences, whether it is a fight scene that is inverted or it's a fight scene that's normal, or it's a big like shootout and you're seeing things just going backwards and forwards at the same time. It's nuts to look at. The amount of planning that Nolan and his team must have put into this, it's insane to think about, but it's so creative. And the fact that Nolan is still one of those filmmakers that is still pushing for going the extra mile with their concepts and their stories while working with a big paycheck from the studio, that is still great. I'm so glad that at least he has that status to keep doing what he does, because he's one of the only few directors that is willing or is even able to even put their own vision out there exactly the way they want it. There's a moment early on where John David Washington just pummels a few people so quickly, and it's like, god damn, this is a well done fight scene. It reminded me of like the beginning days of like Batman Begins, where some of the fight scenes were cut a little too quick, and then you see this where it's just like intense in your face. It's like, oh my god, Nolan has really come a long ways as far as his craft goes, as far as creating these technical sequences that are so incredible to look at. The score by Ludwig Göransson, this isn't a Hans Zimmer score or a David Julian score. It's a new composer that he's working with who's done scores for Creed and Black Panther before and The Mandalorian recently, and he does a great job with the music on this film. It was so great to listen to that throughout. This should be the kind of movie that is like right up my alley all the way through. It's bold, it's daring, it's creative, it's original, it's got a great Helmer behind it who is putting his all into the crafting of making an entertaining theater-going experience, and he definitely does play up that much in this movie. Like, I didn't even see this movie in IMAX, but the sound mixing, the editing was so cranked, everything was like playing off so well, and I didn't think the sound mixing was all that bad. Like, there's a couple parts where it was drowning out certain pieces of dialogue, but for the most part I didn't think it was as bad as some people are kind of talking up the sound mixing to be. I think maybe it could be an issue that's resolved once it hits like a VOD or something like that. Obviously that's not an excuse for how it's played in the theaters, but I don't think it was as bad as people are talking up. All around, it was shaping up to be a movie that was thoroughly entertaining and thoroughly engaging. But the thing about Nolan is that not only is he the director of this movie, he's also the writer of this film, and he has written some of his other films before, and there's only like one instance where he didn't write the script. Like The Prestige is based off a book. I'm not sure if he wrote that, like the movie edition, off the top of my head, and I know he didn't write Insomnia, but for the most part he has had a hand in every single screenplay, so it's not a new thing for him to be doing. But for some reason, the screenplay was really lacking this time around. This is easily Nolan's worst written movie, in my opinion. I was thoroughly disappointed all around because the screenplay is what really bogs it down. You can have as much spectacle in the world in your movies, but at the end of the day, what maybe carries it over is if everything is playing right with the script, if the story is servicing all of these things, these incredible visuals you have. And unfortunately, it kind of crumbles, especially after the movie is over and you kind of think about it a little bit more. There's an excuse that's kind of floating around every single review that people are using and pointing out, like, hey, a lot of the reason it's written the way it is because there's this reveal near the end of the film that totally changes the way you look at how everything else was done before. And by the time you get to the reveal, first of all, I just gotta mention, it was clumsily made. As far as this movie being like really well done all the way through, there's that one part though where the way they staged that reveal, the dialogue that was being delivered, it was like, oh my god, this is really how you're choosing to reveal this thing that's like super impactful and important for the rest of the movie? okay, but Jesus. But second of all, it's one of those reveals that would have hit a lot more if we weren't so emotionally detached from almost every single leading character in this film. And a lot of people have pointed out, like, well, they're only so emotionally distant because of the reveal. It's supposed to change everything. You're supposed to get more from repeat viewings. But I'm just going to be honest. I was going in thinking like, oh, maybe this movie's like going to be like some weird artsy fartsy kind of ending with like a metaphor. Every single character kind of represents something, and that's why they're not like normally defined characters, especially in other Nolan movies. But no, it's just a plot reveal that is it fits in with the context of the movie. It's not metaphorical or reaching for symbolism. So you don't have to be that distant from the characters in that way. You know, throughout the entire movie, it would have hit a lot more if you were building these characters as you went along. And then you get to this reveal, and boom, it impacts, and you understand its importance and the importance it has on the characters. The closest we get to like a heart in this movie is Elizabeth Debicki, who's having a complicated relationship with trying to keep in contact with her son while also dealing with her abusive husband, played by Kenneth Branagh, also the main villain, and she's definitely the best handled character in this movie. But the problem with that is that a lot of that complicated and interesting stuff is pushed to the side because she's a supporting character. And instead of feeling a lot of the emotions she has, instead of experiencing it firsthand, for the most part, it's mainly just exposition. She tells someone what she's feeling or what's going on, and then they're like, okay, we got to keep the plot moving, so we're glad we mentioned that, let's keep going. So even though she is the best handled character in this movie, and there's certainly moments where you're like, yeah, like you're kind of like actively rooting for her, it's still, she can't even escape the trappings of the writing for the characters that Nolan did here. Especially like for Kenneth Branagh, who for the majority of this film, he's doing a great job playing just a outright dickbag. He's slimy and evil, just out with it, you know, and he's really great. But then it gets to a point where they kind of reveal, actually, he has this humanity to him. And you're like, where was that throughout the entire movie? Because you're introducing something that's, once again, more interesting and complex than you're letting on with his performance throughout the entire movie. But now you're just kind of dropping in like, oh, actually, he had this feeling, and here it is. And it's like, we need to feel that. We need to see more from his perspective instead of just you telling us and then just expecting us to just ride with it and feeling like everything is kind of natural. Because it doesn't really feel natural. You get to the third act of the movie and it's kind of set up because of this thing revolving around his character. And it's like, I don't particularly buy it because you didn't do anything to earn it. I already mentioned earlier that John David Washington's physicality is great, you know, like seeing him pummel those dudes. You know, it reminded me of like watching that video of like Keanu Reeves doing like his shooting for John Wick, and he's really fast. And I even saw like a behind the scenes thing of him doing like his choreography and rehearsing, and you know, he's still that fat. It's great, you know, he's a great physical actor, and also he's a great actor if you've seen him in BlacKkKlansman especially. But in this movie, his character is just kind of the same throughout. The movie opens up with this opera house scene, and it's great, it's intense, it's really well made all the way through, but the ending of that opera house scene leading up to John David Washington's character joining Tenet, this organization, and learning about what's going on, it's so rushed, and it barely kind of gives you a moment to live with the character, understand who he is, other than he's really good at his job and he has Christopher Nolan quippy lines here and there. Basically, his character's kind of treated like the bare minimum of how your supporting roles are supposed to be. If you're going to have a supporting character that has like an arc or has more involvement with the plot, that's also great, obviously. But for the most part, a lot of the ways characters are handled is that the main character, that's the one with the arc, the theme is riding on him, and the supporting characters back him up and have the quippy lines of dialogue, and they're fun, you know, and that's the way John David Washington is kind of handled with this. He can beat the crap out of people, he's good at his job, and he has some quippy lines. But he's the main character. Without spoiling anything, you don't really feel like there's ever a change with him. He just kind of seems like he's the same throughout. Even in the beginning when he learns about this time inversion thing, it just seems like instead of like being freaked out or kind of amazed, it just kind of seems like he's like, okay, how's this possible? Like in the most normal, like tame way possible. It's like, dude, shouldn't you be freaking? I know you're like an agent for the government, but shouldn't you be freaking out? Shouldn't everyone be freaking out if they're in your position? Like, I don't know. You don't even really understand why he's really chosen to be enlisted with this program, other than they just kind of say like, oh, it was a test and you did good, so go on out there. And you're just kind of like, okay, so that opening scene was supposed to be where he kind of proves that he's like this awesome epic guy, but really he seems to be doing stuff that's like pretty much in line with any other soldier. He's not doing anything that's like extraordinary or like super special as far as like his line of work, you know. He's doing his job, and that's it. He's a pretty normal character who's in a situation that is more than normal. And there's supposed to be a reveal where everything changes once you learn about this, and it changes the characters as a whole, but it doesn't feel like it, ever. The way they introduce Robert Pattinson in this movie, too, is kind of awkward, because he just kind of walks up and sits next to John David Washington, and they start talking from there. There's no kind of smooth integration of him into the plot. He just plops in like, all right, I'm here, let's go. And these actors are not bad, and they're not doing a bad job in this movie. It's just their roles are just so thin, and there's not a whole lot to them. Like, literally, Robert Pattinson and John David Washington, for the most part, they're kind of interchangeable as far as the characters, other than I don't recall Robert Pattinson, like, beating the crap out of someone in the way John David Washington did, but throughout the movie, they're doing things exactly the same as each other, so what differentiates them? How are they getting along? Because there's a lot riding on this relationship. There's a lot riding on their friendship, their connection, that you don't really get a feel for. You know, you don't really feel like you're watching two soon-to-be best friends like get along or like overcome differences or learn things about each other. It's just, oh, we're assigned together and now we're cool. We're cool. There's a weakness that Nolan has with this movie, I guess, where he's not trying to do things the typical movie way, which is obviously commendable, but by doing so, he's doing things that are just kind of boring and just meh. As the movie even goes on, and mostly when it starts to get near like the third act, like it seems like they're glossing over specific details that you're kind of wondering like, wait, so are you guys doing or how is this like how is this working? Like, how did you organize it this exact way? I'm not sure. Like, I feel like you should probably spend a little bit more time making it perfectly clear for everyone in the audience to kind of get. A lot of people have made the point to point out that this requires repeat viewings, that this is something you won't completely get the first time around. And I completely get that mindset for sure, but it's just for me watching it, you know, by the time the movie ended, I was like, I'm not particularly like, I don't think I need a repeat viewing to get certain things that are going on. I just don't think Nolan did that good a job of presenting certain details near the end of the film. And I also don't think he did a very good job of handling the characters, and it seems like he did it intentionally. I just don't know how a repeat viewing is going to make me care for paper-thin written characters. You know, or events that are very obviously just moving too quickly and just need a little bit more time to breathe. You can watch it again and go like, okay, now that I'm, you know, seeing it a second time, I'm able to kind of connect things a little easier. But at the same time, you could just let some of that stuff breathe and just give a little bit more time to elaborate certain things, and you'd be all good all the way through. And also, as far as the reveal goes, they could have spent a lot more time fleshing that out, the implications of that, or how that affected the characters too, instead of just being like, oh, here's the reveal, and cut the movie off now. You know, this movie really let me down all the way through. This movie's definitely a fun watch when it's action heavy, when you're looking at the spectacle of it all, the visual aesthetic of the reverse thing, and Ludwig Göransson's score is very enjoyable to listen to. But the thing is that Nolan's movies are only as good as his writing. You know, he's obviously a fantastic director. He works with great people behind the scenes to make everything technically good, but a lot of it also rides on his screenplay. This movie doesn't even have a theme, which a lot of his movies do have. Even his last movie, Dunkirk, where a lot of people kind of criticize that for not having the most fleshed out characters, and I sort of mentioned that as far as a negative goes, and I kind of didn't. You can watch my original review as far as like what I meant by that. But even that movie is about something. It has a theme. Tenet, what's the theme in Tenet? Just whatever happens will happen, because time inversion. Time travel's cool, and when you don't really have a strong theme or a theme at all, what the movie relies on next after that is the character writing and the character arc specific to them, how they overcome something or how they change as human beings, and you don't see that. You know, you can say someone made a change near the end, but how did they really change, and how does it feel all that earned? And I can't really say it without spoiling, but I think you guys might understand if you even see the movie. If you're going to make the decision to go see this in theaters, then, you know, more power to you. Go ahead. That's, once again, like I said in my Unhinged review, that's your decision. Go ahead and make that choice if that's what you're going to do. But honestly, I kind of wish they just put this on VOD, you know? Like, as much as it was cool seeing it in a movie theater, it's an experience that I could have just had at home. You know, sometimes a mediocre experience is better in home than just sitting in a theater. I'm gonna give Tenet a C+. This is officially my least favorite Nolan movie, and even then, it's still not awful, so congrats, Nolan, but it's still not particularly good. Compared to all of his other movies, it's definitely a step down. I was surprised that this was even a Nolan movie by the time it ended, considering how this movie was written and how it was overall handled. It's enjoyable in parts, but it's not enough for me, at least for me. I know some people might be like, man, that was super epic because of the action and they don't really care about characters, and hey, that's them. But for me, this is my channel. I speak to me personally. I look for a bit more than just the surface level what you could get. And even sometimes what you just get with the surface level stuff can be enough to carry a movie, but when it's a movie like this that's kind of relying on certain things with the writing, that's when it falls apart. But if you've seen Tenet, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.